Hey everyone, Fruit-Filled Olive Tree Ministry here. So, someone brought to me the other day some scripture and was concerned, saying, "Hey, this sounds a little bit like kind of like the Torah is abolished, that the old covenant is old and done, and we don't need to really follow the commands anymore." And so I'll read that scripture, and then I'm going to show you what I like to call walking around the rock. It's a principle I learned from Tom Bradford. If you haven't checked out Tom Bradford's Torah class, it's awesome. But walking around the rock is, if you were looking at a rock, and someone said, "Hey, what is this boulder, this big boulder? What does it look like?" And you just look at it right here and say, "Well, it's brown. It's got a little streak of quartz through it." And then someone else says, "No, that's not true. It's covered in moss and it's kind of more pinkish hued." Now, you both could be right. The problem is you're both not walking around the boulder to say, this is all around the picture of this boulder. Reading scripture is the same. We can't just look at one verse, one chapter, one book even, and then form a doctrine out of it. So let's do it. So this is 2 Corinthians 3. Verse 6, "He has made us competent to be workers serving a new covenant, the essence of which is not a written text, but the Spirit. For the written text brings death, but the Spirit brings life." Now, this sounds like what it's saying is the old covenant and the written Torah brings death, but all he's saying is that there's a written text and a spirit. In the written text alone, we are destined to sin, and sin leads to death. Without the Spirit, we don't have the forgiveness. We don't have the ability to walk in holiness and purity. And that's all that's saying right there. So moving on down, going to verse 8. "Won't the working of the Spirit be accompanied by an even greater glory? For if there was glory in what worked to declare people guilty," again, all it's saying is that without the Spirit walking in Torah in our own flesh, we will sin. We will be ending up guilty. Won't be accompanied by an even greater glory. For if there was glory in what worked to declare people guilty, how much more must the glory abound in what works to declare people innocent? In fact, by comparison with this greater glory, what was made glorious before has no glory now. For if there was glory in what faded away, how much more glory must there be in what lasts? And so it's important to see this. If you look at verse 7, it says, "Now if that which worked death by means of a written text engraved on stone tablets came with glory, such glory that the people of Israel could not stand to look at Moshe's face because of its brightness," even though that brightness was already fading. You can hear in this, there's kind of a contrast between a written text and a spirit. And what's important to understand about that is we've had prophecy about this in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, that while we have the written Torah, the living Torah, Yeshua will come, put a spirit inside of us, and we'll have in our very hearts his living Torah. Do you think God would put on our hearts something that was dead and abolished? If we read of Ezekiel 36, this is the prophecy that was given. "I will give you a new heart. I will put a new spirit inside of you. I will take the stony heart out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit inside of you and cause you to live by my laws, respect my rulings, and obey them." So he's saying that he will give us the Spirit so that we will follow the Torah, right? So we see here that contrast in 2 Corinthians 3. The written text, stone tablets, leading to death. The other side, a spirit that's gone inside of us, a Torah that's now inside of our hearts. We see this in Jeremiah 31:33. He says, "No longer will any of them teach his fellow community." 31. Let's start 31:30. "Here the days are coming, says Adonai, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day I took them by their hand and brought them out of the land of Egypt, because they, for their part, violated my covenant, even though I, for my part, was a husband to them. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel, says Adonai. I will put my Torah inside of them and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people." So you have to ask yourself, do you think God would really put inside of our hearts something that's been abolished, something that's dead, that leads to death. No, he's saying he's going to put his spirit inside of us, cause us to live by his Torah, because by our own flesh we can't do it. Now people might be saying, well, this is confusing. Why do I read sometimes and think that Paul is sounds like he's saying Torah is gone? Well, if you read in 2 Peter 3:16, Peter goes on to say that, talking about the things that Paul talks about, indeed, he speaks about these things in all of his letters. They contain some things that are hard to understand, things which the uninstructed and unstable distort to their own destruction, as they do with all other scriptures. So Peter talks about this. He says people will do and will misunderstand Paul's writings. And it's because they don't look at the rest of the scriptures. They don't study with a whole heart and a heart filled with the Spirit. The other way that we can know that this is in 2 Corinthians is that this is not this is not Paul saying the Torah is abolished. In Matthew 5:17, we hear him say that I've not come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I've come to complete them. And then we see here in Matthew 7:21, he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Many will come in my name, and I will turn them away. They'll say, didn't I prophesy in your name? Didn't I expel demons in your name? Didn't I perform miracles in your name? Then I will tell them to their faces, I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of lawlessness or Torahlessness. So we see here Jesus talking a lot about, not only did I not abolish the Torah, I brought it to its greatest capability. And those of you that try and teach that I didn't do that I abolished it, I'm going to tell you to depart from me, because you're a worker of lawlessness. Now, it's important to know that if you read a lot of other Bible versions, they'll change that from get away from me, you workers of lawlessness, to get away from me, you workers of evilness, or you evildoers, completely ignoring and erasing what Yeshua is saying, that we need the Torah. A couple others here, John 14:15, if you love me, you will keep my commands. So the way that we love God is by keeping his commands. 1 John 5:3, for loving God means obeying his commands. Moreover, his commands are not burdensome. So again, loving God, loving Yeshua is to love his commands. Pretty, I think, eye-opening stuff here. If you read all around the scriptures, there's prophecy saying that we will not have a written law anymore, but a law by the Spirit, a living law, a living Torah that will come into our hearts, and that we will be given this gift as our faith in Yeshua. We can see here too, that if we love God, we will love his commands, that Yeshua came to create a greater purpose to Torah. And then I'll just end it with this one, Romans 3:31. Paul directly shoots down any idea that his preaching is getting rid of Torah. So in Romans chapter 3, he's talking all about faith, how this new covenant is filled and led by faith. So he says, does it follow now that we abolish the Torah because we trust and we have faith? Heaven forbid. On the contrary, it only confirms the Torah all the more. So read the scriptures, Toda Scriptura, all of the scriptures. Walk around the rock and you'll form good, solid doctrine that you can build a house upon. All right. God bless.